Hey guys, welcome back to Nadir Audio. Today we're going to take a look at the Schiit Audio Magni budget headphone amp. So as I mentioned in some of my other videos, I've always been more of a speaker guy than a headphone guy. I didn't really get into listening to headphones seriously until earlier this year in 2020. And that was when I picked up this Schiit Vali DAC right here. And I already had the Schiit Vali 2 headphone amp, probably had it for about 3 years or so, but it wasn't until I got the Magni that I really started to listen more seriously and to spend a lot more time with some of the pairs of headphones that I already owned. And one other thing I did this year, and I'll include a link to the video in the description below, but I reviewed this little FiiO Q1 Mark II. This is a little portable DAC amp combination. And this is probably the one that I use the most, just because it's portable and I can listen to it in the living room on my laptop if I'm hanging out with my wife, or pretty much anywhere where I'm remote. I can use that. And I'll say I don't like the FiiO as much as the Magni Vali 2 combination, but I do like it quite a bit. I'd say it's right at the level where it's just good enough that I can really enjoy listening to music and not sort of have in the back of my head, oh, I wish this sounded better. So it's pretty good, and the most amazing thing about it is just that you can get something that's pretty good for, under $100 for the combo. So, but it's definitely a step up when you go to this combination. And so when I am doing more serious listening, I do tend to try to use this one instead. But in the last few months, I've gotten lots of comments on my videos, and people are saying, well, you really should check out the Magni, the newer versions of the Magni, and there's the Magni Heresy as well. Where a lot of people think that they're a big improvement of some of the earlier generations, including the Vali 2. So yeah, I thought I would check that out, and we'll talk a little bit more about the sound later in the video. But to start with, there are a few differences. So the finish on all of these has changed. So this is like from about 3 years ago, and it's got kind of a rougher brush metal surface. And back then the feet would come separately and you'd have to stick them on yourself, so the whole unit sits a little higher. This one's just from earlier this year, and I think this might also just be brushed metal, but it's smoother and a little nicer to the touch. It comes with the feet attached. But otherwise they're still using the same basic form factor. And then the Magni is similar, but this one actually has the nicest finish of all three. It's actually a very smooth, nice, I believe it's a paint finish on here, not just the bare metal. And they've done a couple other things. They've made the volume knob bigger than it was on the earlier generations, which I like. And they've removed the white LED from the front panel. Now I know that those LEDs annoy some people. They don't really bother me unless you have a LED on when you're trying to sleep. It doesn't really bother me. But they've moved the LED so you can tell when it's on. There's actually an LED on the board, and you can see it through these vents here on the top of the unit. And then if we look at the back here, it's all kind of familiar stuff, very similar to the Vali. So the Vali has sort of a DIN style power connector, which is a little different. This one just kind of has the kind that we're used to, and it came with a made in China power brick. And then we have the basic power. We have the inputs. We have a high-low gain. We'll talk a little bit more about this later. For all the headphones I'm using, they're all fairly efficient, or sensitive, so I didn't really have to use the high gain. I used the low gain on both of those amps. And then we have our pre-out, same as on the Vali, so you can use this as a little pre-amplifier too if you want. And that's pretty much it. The functionality is pretty simple. It comes packaged in the usual sort of plain cardboard box with the Schiit sticker on the front of it. And it's, inexpensive packaging, but it works perfectly fine. It keeps it from getting damaged in transit. As I mentioned before, it comes with a little power brick as well, and a little owner's manual, and that's pretty much it. So it's pretty simple. You just plug it in, and you're pretty much ready to go. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the sound. Okay, so I've been doing a lot of listening with the Magni over the last month or so, and then in the last week I've been doing some back-to-back comparisons, listening to albums first with the Magni and then with the Vali 2. And for these comparisons I've sort of limited myself to these three budget headphones. So we have the HIFIMAN HE-35xs, we have the Grado SR60s, and then we have the Sennheiser Urbanite XLs. So we will be looking at some more expensive headphones and also some more expensive headphone amplifiers in future videos. But this one is pretty strictly at the budget end of the audiophile gear. But you know, these two amplifiers, they really do have quite a different sound signature, which is a good thing. It makes it a lot more interesting to do these comparisons. If you're going to make any generalities, I'd say that the Magni has slightly more detail, especially in the high end, and it has a bit tighter bass response. And then the Valley 2 has a little bit of those sort of more classic tube characteristics, so it's a little bit warmer sound. Definitely has some more spaciousness. You get a little more sense of the room, a little bit more holographic separation between things, space between instruments, that sort of thing. Now it's subtle. You know, if you haven't seen my other video where I talk about the Reisong A10 amplifier, which is a full-on tube amplifier, that thing gives you the full tube experience. This is just a little bit of a taste of it. But it is something I liked specifically for certain recordings and with certain headphones. But yeah, I'd say to make a overall decision between these two, it really kind of boils down to specifically what headphones you're listening with and what genre of music you're listening to, and then also the specific recordings. So yeah, let's take a look at some of the specifics that I found in my tests. Okay, so I'll start out with a couple of rock albums, and in general I tend to find the Urbanite XLs do the best with rock and classic rock and heavier electronic music. I just kind of like the more closed back sound. Now these headphones are slightly rolled off between 2 and 10K, but then at 10K they're back up, so you do get a little bit of that sparkle, which can be good for high-end detail, but also can sometimes be a little grating with cymbals if you're getting too much treble. So that's one thing to be aware of. And I do feel like the Urbanite XLs have the best synergy with the Valley 2. I think that in general they benefit from the sort of warmth and the spaciousness, and also not quite having so much detail on that really high end of the treble. I think helps them out with a lot of that type of music. So certainly with, I listened to a couple of Police albums, Zenyatta Mandata and also Ghost in the Machine. And on both of these I preferred the Urbanite XLs and the Valley 2. That was the best combination. And I felt like they both did pretty well. I mean, the Ghost in the Machine is a slightly better recording, and it has that sort of bigger, fuller, it almost sounds like they're playing in a warehouse space. Where Zenyatta Mandata is a little bit flatter sounding, but they're both good recordings. And I feel like with the other headphones, the SR60s I actually generally don't like for most heavier music. I feel like the Police is one of those exceptions where they actually do fairly well, not as well as the Urbanites. And I felt like with these, they also, at least for these Police albums, paired a little bit better with the Valley 2. And kind of in the middle were the HE35xs. So again, these are sort of the most versatile headphones. They sound good with pretty much everything I played with them, but they might not excel in certain areas. Like I felt like on this one they didn't do as well as the Urbanites, but they did well. And this was where they also kind of broke in terms of the synergy. I do feel like these in general have a better synergy with the Magni. They're boosted, I think it's between like 3 and 6K, so they have a kind of a different sound than these, but I feel like they benefit more from that sort of high-end detail, and also they benefit more with that sort of slightly tighter bass than the other headphones do, which is a good thing. So for these two albums, for example, I felt like on Zenyatta Mandata, they did better with the Magni, which is what they seem to do better with generally in recordings. But then with Ghost in the Machine, that was sort of an exception. I felt like they actually sounded just slightly better with the Valley 2, and I think that had to do with that big room sound of that particular recording. But yeah, I'd say for most things, I felt they paired better with the Magni. And then moving on to electronic music, so I listened to Aphex Twin's Richard D. James album. I picked that one, we've talked about it before, but it's just a really good sounding recording. And this as well I felt did best with the Urbanite XL and the Valley 2. But I felt again it did actually very well with these two. as well. So it was, the matchup between these three with this particular recording was a lot closer. So I feel like they all sounded very good, and you can enjoy listening to it with any of these headphones. I do feel like the HIFIMANs, again, paired best with the Magni. There was just something about the clarity that you got with that sort of high end that sort of outweighed any warmth that you would get, which is not as important of a consideration with this. I do feel like the other ones did a little bit better with the Valley on this recording, and I think it's just for Aphex Twin, a lot of times they'll put these sort of kind of grating and jarring sounds into their music in places on purpose. It's kind of just an artistic thing, and I feel like the Valley 2 on some headphones like these, where you're up at that 10K level, it sort of takes the edge off, and it works a little bit better. Whereas with these, it just they sounded actually really good with the HIFIMANs and the Magni. So that was a good combination for that particular recording. So then I also did listen to some classical music and some opera. For this particular video, I chose the soundtrack to the movie Diva. So we have that La Wally, the area at the beginning, which again, the SR60s tend to do best with opera, and there were no exception here. And they just paired with the Valley 2. I mean, that was one of the best things that I listened to in this set of listening. You know, it definitely gave you goosebumps. I felt like an engagement factor, an emotional connection with the music, and literal goosebumps. You know, kind of like the character in the movie Diva when he's watching her perform in the beginning. That's definitely what you want, is that emotional engagement. But again, you know, all of these headphones did well, and the Magni did really well with that as well. So it's not that it was bad, it's just that there was this particular pairing for that recording was kind of amazing. Now that soundtrack also has lots of ambient stuff that sounded good with that particular setup, but there is one track, the third track, which is a little bit more of a rock song. It's kind of a drum machine sound. That again went to the Urbanite XLs. So even within a particular album, you can have tracks where they sound better with a particular setup. So, you know, it really just comes down to playing around with these things and figuring out what you like. And then lastly, I did listen to a bunch of jazz. For this one, I'll just mention John Coltrane's Live at the Village Vanguard. It's one of my favorite recordings of his. And again, these were all pretty close. I really enjoyed listening to it with both amplifiers and with all of these headphones. But I'd say in the end, actually, this was the one where the Urbanite XLs and the Magni, strangely enough, sort of had the best sound. I felt like there's it's a good room sound, and that extra little bit of detail really kind of brought things to life. You know, there's quiet passages, there's space in between the tracks where you can hear people in the audience talking to one another, and it was just kind of amazing how well that worked together. And I didn't feel like this is a very warm recording anyway. I didn't feel like it benefited that much from the Valley 2. So yeah, this was the one exception where I do think that this paired a little bit better with the Magni. And again, these two as well, I felt this did better with the Magni. It also did very well in this recording, just slightly below the Urbanites. And similarly, this was one case where, in general, I think the SR60s have a little bit more synergy with the Valley 2, but for this particular recording, I did like the Magni better. Now, it was a subtle difference, but again, it had something to do with that, just adding a little bit of weight to it. You know, these especially, they're very open-sounding headphones, and that's one of the reasons I don't like them as much with sort of heavier things or things that have a real beat. It's not because they have good bass response, and I don't find them to be bright either. I think that they're very detailed, but they're not really tilted up in the treble, I don't find. But there is just like for some recordings, you're just looking for a particular weight that you don't get with those headphones, and the Magni was able to add a little bit of that with this particular recording. So, you know, I listened to a lot of other stuff. I don't want this video to get too long, so I just kind of talked to you guys about some highlights. But I think the general takeaway is that, you know, it really just depends on the synergy between the headphone and the amp and the specific recordings you're listening to. So everything I listened to, these are all Apple lossless files I had ripped from CDs onto my MacBook Pro. So there's nothing special going on there. But yeah, one nice thing about this price range, because most of these things are under $100, you can afford to experiment a little bit, you know, try different things out and see what you like. So as you start to get more expensive, I think this is a good area where you can sort of get to know what you like, so that when you do want to start to spend a little bit more money on the next level, you can start out with things that are more likely to conform to your tastes. And that's one of the things we'll be doing in upcoming videos as well. But for now, yeah, I really like the Magni. I think it's a great headphone amp. I'm certainly going to be using it a lot. We'll be talking about it and comparing it against other things in future videos. But yeah, as far as a complete determination for me, I like having them both, and I like them both for different things. So I can't really say that one's better than the other. But yeah, that's it for this one, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all in the next video.